following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Dedicated to empowering you with information,
to make positive choices,
and be advocates for your overall well-being.
Welcome to The Health View. Welcome to The Health View. I'm Yvonne Dunitz, and I am delighted that we are doing this special show today at GM Roth Design Remodeling, located at 12 Murphy Drive in Nashua, New Hampshire. And if you've never been here before, I encourage you to come to see how beautiful additions and rooms can be made. In fact, in our home in Nashua, they did a wonderful job in doing our kitchen and our addition. And we are so delighted to offer the Health View today here at GM Roth so that we can utilize their working kitchen. Would you ever think that what you eat could affect your hormones as well as your thyroid? Well, in this particular program, you are going to learn all about how food is good medicine. Welcome to the Health View. We're delighted that you're with us today and enjoy this special program with Dr. Chan and Chef David.
Welcome to The Health View. I'm Dr. Laura Chan. I'm a naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist. I'm so excited that we get to put into action a lot of what we've been talking about on our show for the past several months. So food as medicine, it's one of my biggest passions in my practice. I'm very often recommending to people how to change their diet and the way they eat in order to feel better. We also talk a lot about lifestyle, and one of the big points that we try to make is how to manage your stress to keep yourself healthy and well. So one of our goals for the cooking class today is to talk about how we're going to be using food to have it be as nourishing as possible for your Thanksgiving meal and to keep your stress minimal. My husband, Chef David, is going to be talking a lot about how to prepare an excellent and healthy Thanksgiving meal. And we're actually going to be doing a gluten-free Thanksgiving, as well as keeping most food allergies minimal throughout this. So whether you are gluten-free yourself, you probably know someone who is, because it's estimated that about 1 out of 4 Americans is currently trying or has at least tried eating gluten-free. And that's for a variety of reasons that I'm going to get into intermittently throughout the show today. I don't want to take away from our culinary experience, so I'm going to let David do most of the talking as he gets the recipes underway. But I'll be jumping in and explaining why we're making some of the choices that we are with the ingredients and with the recipes that we are. But just quickly, talking about gluten. Gluten is a protein, and it's a protein that's found in wheat products, as well as barley and rye. And it's what makes your bread stretchy, for instance, like when you're stretching pizza dough, gluten is what gives it that stretch. And it can be problematic for people for a variety of reasons. One of the main reasons is that the wheat that was grown about 50 years ago that your parents or grandparents might have eaten is actually a little bit different the way it's grown today. It's been very hybridized. And so that's one of the theories as to why the gluten is more difficult to digest in foods today. Another theory is actually that people are reacting to the spray that's on most wheat plants. You might have heard of Roundup being used on plants, and that's very common in farming practices in the United States today, and it's a potentially common reason why many of us are reacting to a lot of wheat products or gluten products. The third reason is our digestive health. So the external causes being the gluten in the plant itself, and the third reason being that many people have compromised digestive tracts or immune systems, causing them to be a little bit more reactive to the wheat products. So whatever the reason may be, whether you tolerate gluten well or not, this is still going to be a nutritious and delicious feast for everyone tonight. So we'll be teaching about how to do that. So I'll introduce Chef David, who will be moving forward with the recipes.
Hello, I'm Chef David. Thank you all for being here and for watching. So to get started, I would like to talk a little bit first about being as stress-free as possible, especially during the typically stressful, busy times of the holidays. So in order to be stress-free, it first starts with a lot of planning, and that has to do with this theory called mise en place, which literally means everything in its right place. And that both means physically, so like all the ingredients chopped, everything, all the knives set and everything, and also a state of mental being where you've read the recipes, you know what you need to do, and that can help you plan as far as like the timing goes. So with that said, looking through the recipes here, we'll just be going through these one by one. You can see that this herb roasted Cornish game hen takes close to an hour, and so within an hour's time that we have, I'm gonna get cracking. So if I could have a pair of gloves, please. So also in that vein, I chose a Cornish game hen as opposed to doing a turkey, because a turkey would be over the course of 4-hour-long segments as opposed to 1 hour long. So Cornish game hens are a good substitute. They are, 1, cute little birds, and 2, quite delicious. And also, I like to start with preparing proteins first and raw meat first, so then I could then have a clear workspace afterwards without any worry of cross-contamination. And so what we're going to do with this Cornish game hens are make this herb rub, which I've already rubbed. It's just a combination of fresh herbs, garlic, olive oil. So any sort of poultry application, even pork or any sort of meat really, is just a delicious way to have a nice bit of flavor going on. So all we're going to do, get these little guys. The Cornish game hens are actually a type of chicken, basically like also called a game bird. So they have a bit, they're not as gamey as maybe a pheasant, but have a bit more flavor and stuff than chicken. And so feel free, we're going to get our hands nice and dirty. Nice rub on these guys. Already looking better already. Dress these guys up for their date with the oven. And then be sure to get inside the cavity too, because that's a good spot to keep the flavors really fully immersed. All right, looks like these guys are looking happy. Listen, yes. Happy, ready to go.
You look too cute to be cook.
Then we're going to start changing from cute to delicious. And if we could just magically put those into the oven. Just thank you. And now, ready to go on to the next step. And that would be these mashed root vegetables that we're going to go through. And if I could get those mashed root veg, please. And so you can't really have Thanksgiving without mashed potatoes. But instead of just having straight mashed potatoes that have, very little to no nutritional value, we decided to throw in some turnips and cauliflower, which will then provide a nice nutritional component. So I already actually pre-boiled the veg. So I'll just get those going right in there. And then what we're going to do instead of cream, we're going to use an almond milk mixture. And so almond milk is a good substitute for dairy. It still has, basically when you use dairy, you're just looking for the fat content to help things bind together, make things a bit more unctuous and yummy. And so almond milk has that nice fat element because nuts are a great source of healthy fats, while at the same time being delightfully dairy-free. So, yes, dairy-free and gluten-free.
All right, gluten-free first.
I'd like to add while you're doing that one of the reasons we choose dairy-free is because that's another one of the most common foods that people tend to react to. So we're choosing to avoid any cream or any milk, as well as any cheese in this. And for any vegetarian or vegan, we'll have plenty of side dishes for them that they can have. We are choosing to use butter because it's delicious, and we use grass-fed butter, which creates much healthier fat than a conventional butter that's not typically from grass-fed cows. And butter has a very low lactose content. It's very high in healthy fat when it comes from a grass-fed cow. So we are choosing to use that as part of our whole recipe.
Thank you. Can I have the bay leaves
and
thyme, please? Question? Yes. Ghee would. Yes. So ghee is just another word for clarified butter. So it has all the milk solids completely removed, as well as any of the whey, as well, that you would find in dairy. So I'm going to infuse this almond milk with fresh bay leaves and thyme. So just drop those plop right in there. And so if you haven't cooked with fresh bay leaves, the very first time I discovered these, there's no going back to dry.
All dry in my house.
Not at all. So I'll actually pass these around so you could smell the difference that fresh bay leaves. Sold in, actually it was kind of hard to find some fresh bay leaves lately, I think because everyone's shopping like crazy. But definitely won't be the same without it. Can I have the garlic bowls, please? Right over there. And we're actually going to add a couple things that aren't on the recipe. A couple cloves of garlic. And now here's a little trick to remove the peel nice and easy. Is first separate it from the bulb, or separate the bulb from the head. So we'll just let's do 3, like things garlicky. And then 2 similar bowls, metal, and then do a little garlic dance there. Shake, 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 shake. And then, just like so, it's removed the peels from the garlic.
David taught me that at work. Thank you.
Like magic. And since we're just going to want the flavor, all we need to do is take the flat of a knife, smash in, smash in, smash in. There we go. And it calls for a 1/4 cup of olive oil, but we'll just go ahead and use some of this nice grass-fed butter. So Kerrygold is a company that I've used. It's pretty typically found in most stores, so that's kind of why I choose it. It's all over, so flavor going on there. And so now that that's going, we'll go through a little demonstration on how I chopped these vegetables. So cauliflower, potato, turnip. Very simply. The cauliflower is just a quick, rough chop. Where can everyone see? Okay. I don't know where else I could go. But so rough chop. So always with make a claw with this hand to prevent any accidental slicing. And then just kind of go right along that way. And then, since we're doing rough, it kind of doesn't matter too much. Yeah. So that is a rough chop of cauliflower. And now with the turnip, very easy, just take off the top, take off the bottom just a little bit. And then here's where I like to kind of play a game to see, as far as peeling goes, how long I could go with one peel. And it's a fun challenge every single time. It never gets old, oddly, sadly maybe. But let's see if I could do the whole turnip. I think so far I'm doing good. Yes. I used to do it from up to down, but that was not quite as fun as, yes, one full peel, done. And then basically just kind of support it with both hands, like so. One chop, two chop, three chop. Then you have these nice little planes that you could then put flat on there, like so. And turnip is done. And potatoes, don't bother peeling them. These are the nice yellow flesh ones. So their skins are rather nice. They're not really too dirty. Definitely give them a good scrub just in case, because they do grow in the ground. And then same, kind of like with the turnip, just a couple rough chops. Flip them onto the flat sides. And that is set. And this will be a little take-home snack for later. For demo purposes only.
You don't worry about the brown of the cauliflower?
I do not. It's just a little aged. Like once it starts getting fuzzy, then that's the bad stuff. But till then, it's just a little elder. But another way to maintain stress-free holidays is to always maintain a tidy workstation. Right, Robin?
Sorry.
So then,
Get in
because
trouble for that at work.
each time,
Not cleaning up as much.
just like so. So I like to, every time I finish a task, kind of wipe down and reset the station so I'm all ready to go next. So that's going. Next, we'll kind of start going into the wild rice stuffing. And I did things a little bit differently from this menu. I did not add any cranberries. And also, instead of a medium dice on the onions, I am doing a julienne cut, which is what I will demonstrate here. It's a very simple recipe. It just has to do with putting together a couple of different components. There's a couple techniques, though, that I would like to go over. The first of which is how to julienne an onion. But before we get into that, I want to spend some time on knives. So often people ask me what makes a good knife, and what kind of knives I use. So here are two very different ones. This is obviously really nice looking, Japanese, handmade, like using the same forging technique that they use on samurai swords, the folding over and over and over hundreds of times. And this I got for $12, and it works great though, but the funny thing is, they both work great. It's all about how you maintain your knives. Obviously this one looks nicer and feels nicer in my hand than this cheap hard plastic. But ultimately, if you keep any of your knives sharp, That's all that really matters. Because the most dangerous thing in the kitchen is a dull knife. So as far as sharpening goes, I brought some of my tools here. So there's a difference between sharpening and honing. And to understand that, you then understand, you can kind of see the light catching that really shiny edge, perhaps?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is called the edge, and that's what's actually cutting through the ingredient, and hopefully not your finger. But the larger the edge is, the more there is that can cut through, obviously. And then over time, so like a perfect edge looks like this, nice and straight. And then over time, on the microscopic level, the little metallic filaments kind of start coming out and out and out. And so eventually you wind up with a dull edge. And so what honing does, this process called honing, is it brings this edge back to this. And that's what these two honing rods do. This is a ceramic honing rod for harder steels, and this is basically just I think they call it like a diamond steel honing rod, which is used for just everyday knives. And so you would use these, I use these after any type of big task. So after julienne, like, a case of onions, then I do some honing, get it sharp again. But every week or every month, I bust out my stone to bring a larger edge, because over time the edge just starts to disappear. And no matter how much you hone, if there's no edge to hone and bring back to this again, there won't be any more sharpness. Turn this down a little bit. Nice. And so what the stone does is it actually, you grate against it, and this nice, I'll do a quick little, so it sounds great, metal on stone. But you get used to it, and the fact that you're really taking care of your knives makes it worthwhile. So that's it. Oh, there's also this device, which is basically like the honing steels, except in a handy little slotted compartment. So all you need to do is run your knife along, zoop, through the coarse grade, and then once through the fine grade. And this actually, I'm going to say it, Ren Wayne I bought for $12. Not that good. They go up to, I've seen some of these devices for like $60. So I wonder if like in between might find something that would be worthwhile. Okay.
So is the stone the best one, would you say?
So a stone is needed to create the edge. This is just another honing device as opposed to sharpening.
Use the rod after big tasks and a stone once a month.
Yeah. I mean, I cook for about 40 hours a week, so I probably use my knives a bit more, so like once a month for me, but maybe like 2 or 3 times for the average home cook. So, any more questions about knives, anything like that? All right. So here's how to julienne an onion. So this is where the roots, you kind of see them coming off. That is the bottom. And so obviously the other side will be the top. Just take the knife. And so when you cut, always let the blade do the cutting. You shouldn't need to apply very much force at all. It should just be able to slide right through. So cut the bottom, cut the top just a little bit. Cut this guy in half. And then take the peel. And then when you julienne, which basically you see these tiny little, not tiny, but very kind of a thin cut, you're going to want to make sure that you get the core out in order to achieve that. So the core is it's on the bottom, and you just make a triangular incision both ways, so that then you're left with this guy that just comes out. Do that with the other guy. And then, oops. Basically going to follow the curve of the onion along the whole width. So go, always remember the claw. Yes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And as you do more and more, you can start increasing in speed and don't feel the need to look at all. And then this is a good test to see how sharp your knife is as well. Because if your knife is not sharp, you won't be able to do that. But what you're left with is slivers, like so, which will be perfect for what we're going to do in this application, which is caramelize an onion. So, very simply, a little frying pan. Just melt a little knob of butter in there. And then just drop the onion in. And so caramelizing an onion, what that does, what that basically means is you're using heat to bring out the sugars of the onion, which will then coat the onion and make it nice and delicious, kind of brings out the sweetness. And it's a good, caramelized onions you could use in many applications, like sandwiches, salads. That's basically how you make French onion soup, caramelized onions, and add some stock. And then this will just go for a bit. And then I like to add a little bit of salt because that helps to take out the sugars a bit faster. And then we'll show you how to slice a mushroom. Very simple. It's actually, mushrooms are one of my absolute favorite things to slice. Because they're so easy, your knife, you feel it's always super sharp. So all you do is just kind of with the claw and there, just kind of go basic knife up and down motion with your fingers here as the fulcrum. So and then you got these nice little slices of mushroom, just like so. So easy. But you can see why I like mushrooms. It's going through a whole 5 pounds of them is a breeze. So cleaning mushrooms, good question. How do you clean mushrooms?
Want to answer? We've been talking.
So you don't, a lot of people for some reason soak mushrooms, but basically mushrooms are like sponges and they will soak up all that water and just become slimy and rubbery and squeaky when you cook them. And so I don't understand why people keep doing that, but they do. So the way that to properly clean mushrooms is just take either paper towel or some sort of cloth and just do a nice little scrub. Just get the dirt off. Yep. I had one. Well, let's pretend this guy is a mushroom, just simple. And they actually do make mushroom brushes that are designed to scrub mushrooms. They might even have cute little mushroom shapes to them and stuff, I think, if I recall correctly. But like I said, as always, keep your station tidy. And then so it doesn't, so the proper way, let's go back to the caramelized onions. You could really rush the caramelizing of the onions and use really high heat and kind of cheat and add a little bit of water to keep them, to bring up the sticky onion parts. Or you kind of do them low and slow, which really does make a difference and makes them it doesn't dry them out too much. But we'll just kind of keep that going on in the meantime while those are cooking. And actually, if we can show this guy. Can you bring me that aluminum foil? And so this is after cooking the rice and everything, and then combining the mushrooms and the caramelized onions, you kind of just put it into a casserole dish like so. And this is it with some fresh herbs. And then we're just going to cover that with some aluminum foil and then plop it into the oven to warm through. So aluminum foil, please. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Could you make that the night before?
Yeah, and so this is, the question was if you can make this the night before, and you absolutely can, and it would be highly recommended, so you could spend more time with your family, your in-laws, or if you're not get along with them, you could not make it the night before and just hide in the kitchen. Yeah, whichever is least stressful. That's the idea. There we go. And then one note about cooking the rice. You'll notice I used, in the recipe it says chicken stock. I actually used vegetable stock, so this is vegetarian. But I definitely will not use water because I don't see any point in using water when you could use something with flavor. Because there's nothing worse than bland food. And it's just so easy to add flavor at anywhere you go. And so instead of adding just straight almond milk with these mashed root veg, we're getting some nice herbs going on in there and garlic flavors. And so along with this, we got some sage and thyme and vegetable stock that will just kind of infuse that whole flavor.
Good.
It's good?
Got
All
its
right.
temperature.
And then so that'll be nice and heated up for our dinner time. And the next thing we're going to go over are the Brussels sprouts. Now these Brussels sprouts, most people, they hear Brussels sprouts, they don't think good thoughts. And for good reason, because if you don't cook them right, they're awful. I mean, they're just little cabbages, little baby cabbages. So along those lines, like if you cook cabbage and just have watery, gross cabbage, it's pretty unpleasant. But nice pickled cabbage, yes please. Then, or some sort of nice braised cabbage with some cider vin, that works out well. So in this case, we are going to use nice New Hampshire staple, some maple syrup, and to offset that sweetness, we're going to use some chili flakes. And a quick note about maple syrup, there are two grades. There's grade A, there's actually 4 grades, grade A, B, C, and D. Grade A, believe it or not, is actually the lesser grade. Simply it's the syrup that first comes out, and so it doesn't have all of the nutrients and that rich flavor that grade B, C, and D have. Grade B kind of goes from further inside the tree, so it has a lot more of those nice nutrients. But oddly, it's really difficult to find grade B. I've only been able to find it at Whole Foods.
They have it at Lowell Farm.
Lowell Farm.
The kid who makes it in Wilton, or
Yeah, we have a ton in New Hampshire grade B. It's darker, right?
Yes.
Grade B.
We've got a ton in Concord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Great.
Right, you guys,
Well, I
are
can't.
you in Concord? We have a lot of farms up there.
oh, in Nashua, there's a couple farms in Hollis. And
Okay,
there's
Hollis too, yeah.
There's a young gentleman who started making it when he was like 14, and now he has his own company, and it's a really, really good maple syrup.
Nice.
They have the A and the B.
Good. Yeah, it seems like for most bigger grocery stores, they only sell grade A.
I agree.
So gotta go to the farms.
We can pick,
Noted.
I usually buy like 2 gallons. Do you? Like at the,
I buy something.
David,
that
do you
big
need
and-
bigger
this
than, no, I
ingredient?
do a
I do not
gallon.
need those yet.
Yeah, it's $48 to $58, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Okay. So all we're gonna do is you could measure things out. I think I have some specific measurements here, or you could just sort of eyeball. Nothing too crazy, just a little bit of sweetness to cover, and some salt. So when you're seasoning things, I like to go from above a greater height than right above the ingredients, because that allows for a more even distribution of the salt. And when I'm on TV, it looks a bit more professional or chefy. And again, with the peppers, I won't go too crazy, just a little. And then we're going to do a little mix. Oh, and some olive oil. Here. Just a little bit, because you need a fat to help really kind of do the cooking. Otherwise, it'll just kind of burn as opposed to cook. And then we just do a little stir, make everything nice and glistening. So we get something like that along those lines. Glisten, glisten. And then,
Do you want the sunflower seed?
nope, those get mixed in at the end. And all we do here is, so I did make a note that, that's a much bigger one than I needed. Oh well. In order for things to be cooked consistently, it helps to kind of take the time and put all of these on the flat ends. Because it does make a difference. I've tried to just leave it like, I don't want to. And then I had some that weren't totally cooked and charred as I like them. So taking that extra step. And since we did all the planning and preparation beforehand, we have plenty of time to take this extra time to do this now to make it right. Yeah, exactly. It could be very calming and meditative indeed. Because all we can do is think about just us and the Brussels sprouts right now.
I'd say perfect size pan now.
Yeah, look at that.
Oh, how about that?
Yes.
Looks like I was thinking better than I thought. It's like I've cooked Brussels sprouts before. All right, and get these nice and distributed. And see, that doesn't take that long. And this was, just so you know, started off with 3 pounds of Brussels, actually closer to 4. But by the time you take the ends off and get the outer leaves, because they're just like a cabbage, the outer leaves can be kind of unappetizing. And so we'll actually wait, because these only take about 10 minutes or so to cook. So we can just set those on the counter and do a quick off-camera washing hands. And now in that space, these onions, see how they got in? Now that's all the sugars that have been released from the onion, all that brown caramel. And at this point, you can just add a little splash of water, and that will help what's called deglazing the pan. And so that just releases, you can see all that brown stuff is now just in the water. Water turned instantly brown. And so just released completely from there. You're going to put it back on. And they're pretty much set a little bit. I put in too much water, but the stuffing's already made, so it's all right.
Has there been research on the aluminum foil, like the aluminum leaching into food, or is aluminum foil generally safe?
Aluminum foil is generally pretty safe.
Yeah. Oh, where did that voice come
Where
from?
did that voice come from? Yes, aluminum foil is generally pretty safe, though there's concern about aluminum getting into food from aluminum cookware. Typically with aluminum foil, it's over on top of your food more so than when you're stirring a lot on aluminum cookware, and that's getting it released more into your food in that instance. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good question about whether aluminum foil is unpleasant not good for cooking. And just a quick note about these pots and pans that I'm using. They're made out of stainless steel, and in the middle is a layer of copper, and it's stainless steel again on the bottom. It's called just a 3-ply construction. It's pretty standard. Cuisinart makes a really great set for really economical compared to like all-clad. Yeah, I've had these guys for probably close to like 8 years now, and they're still holding up strong. Yeah, so they got these onions going here. See how all brown these guys are now? Caramely looking. All right, so that's it. And now we got this. We'll go back to the mash and finish that up. So we have the almond milk, which has been infused with the herbs and the butter. And then if we could just kind of waft it towards you. Those fresh bay leaves and thyme and garlic, butter. Oh, yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Can you substitute other nut milks instead of almond if you're allergic?
You sure can. Are you allergic? Oh, noted.
Plenty of other things we use.
Okay.
But like the cashew milk?
Cashew milk you could use, yep. You could also use rice milk. It would be a safe option.
And then before you dump in all of that almond milk mixture into the mashed root, be sure to remove the thyme and you can leave it in there, it'll just make it tough to eat twigs and dangerous leaves. Yes. 2 cloves. Oh, one more in there. Yes. But the garlic might still be okay even if I did leave it in because it'll mash up pretty well. And I actually just bought a new piece of equipment at long last. A masher.
David, really?
Truly. I was doing it the hard way before, but now
How did you do it without it?
with a large spoon.
Okay, just curious. Well, what if sometime we're stuck with that one? Now I'll know how you did it.
Yeah, a large spoon will get the job done. First time using this. This is a game changer right here.
Yeah, for 20 years.
Well, 20 years of glory. All right, so yeah. And so the thing with this is, with the mashed potatoes, it'd be difficult to make a non-potato mash just because of the amount of starch that is in potatoes. It kind of helps it hold together, and cauliflower doesn't have very much starch. Turnips definitely don't. And so without the potato, it'll just kind of be not really a mash, but more like I don't even know what, something strange and not as tasty as this is going to be. Sweet potato, that's a good question. Would sweet potato work? I'm going to say you could probably make it work, but I would have other ways to incorporate sweet potato. Like just roasting sweet potatoes on their own would be great, because I don't think that sweet potatoes have that much actual like that same type of starch as a regular potato. And then I don't know how the colors would be all right, actually, maybe. I have had sweet potato casserole that is similar.
Do you remember, did you ever have the sweet potato casserole that had the marshmallows on top?
That was my mama's favorite.
Have that one?
That's my mama's
We're leaving that
favorite.
out in this one.
Yeah, no marshmallows.
Yeah, it's a familiar recipe from childhood.
But so when I forgot to mention that when I had cooked these root vegetables, I had salted the water. Because if you try to salt it later, it doesn't adhere as much, it doesn't flavor as readily as it would if you do it beforehand. So always salt water. And speak on the subject of salt, I think every class I go on a little rant on how salt has got a bad rap. It's changing now, but salt is amazing. Like, to not cook with salt is a cardinal sin. I wouldn't hear of it. Just because salt really brings out the flavor of anything that you put it with. If I was like stuck on an island, I would bring salt, because it'd make all those coconuts so much better. So definitely don't be afraid of salt, and especially if you just think about, if you're trying to maintain a lower sodium diet, just be aware of like the quantities of salt that you're using versus like how much food you're actually, because this is about 4 pounds of vegetables and maybe 2 tablespoons, like maybe less than an ounce of salt. So
I'm going to interject here and on the salt comment, if I may, and
yeah.
just say that it does matter what kind of salt you use. Sea salt, Celtic salt, or Himalayan salt are really high in minerals and actually have a lot of health benefits, whereas some of the processed salts, like the Morton salts, that one is actually more problematic for health. So if you're using a good quality salt, then I agree to use it liberally. And it does make your cooking taste much better, I agree.
I have a question about salt. The Mortons have iodine in it, which isn't that important? That's important for our diets? I've switched over to the Himalayan and those salts.
Yes.
But I'm curious, am I actually doing my children and myself a disservice by I don't have any iodine?
Right, which is an excellent question. And they don't add iodine into sea salts. It's high in many other minerals, which are really important. And so you're getting those. But then you need to make sure that you're getting iodine from food as well. So if you're not choosing an iodized salt, then seaweed should be in your diet, at least occasionally, because that's the highest source of iodine. And that's not something that we Americans typically eat. But
I eat it. My kids, not
eat
so
it.
much.
Right, you can sneak it into things. You can take like a nori roll, which is the wrap that sushi gets wrapped in,
Yes.
and you can crumble it up and just throw it in something, and it just adds almost a little saltiness to it. So you can hide that in something, or you can make some really creative nori rolls on a non-Thanksgiving gathering. But it's in other foods, and seaweed being one of the highest sources, but it's in other vegetables as well. So if you're eating a pretty nutrient vegetable dense diet, then you're getting some iodine in there.
Do you feel
which
like
is
that
important.
most of the food that we buy, and we don't like to, but are pre-prepared for some of the kids on the run, have that in it?
That have the iodine in it?
They must.
Well, you can buy those seaweed chips. Have you seen those?
I'm just
they're
saying if
cooked-
once in a while you
Like if
go
you're buying a
through
pizza.
they're
Yeah.
going to have iodized salt, right?
Oh,
Like-
yeah, and don't worry
Right,
about it.
right,
Yeah,
right.
don't worry
Okay,
about that.
because I got rid of the iodized salt. And I'm all
Yeah.
sea salt now, but I'm thinking,
No, don't worry about
they
that
order
on
pizza
occasion.
from
It's all about the
Checkmate,
total
it's
amount.
coming in.
Yeah,
all
it's all
right.
about the total amount. I always suggest to people, unless you have a major health concern and you're trying to get out of it, with diet, it's an 80-20 rule. 80% of the time eat as well as you can, and 20% of the time you just do what you can.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
okay.
All this
So-
is iodized salt, right? Do you think? When you use a broth? Do you think it's iodized salt?
It's often sea salt.
Oh,
Sea salt
oh, good.
and no salt. Oh no, it just says salt.
That's going to be iodized salt.
Iodized?
most likely, yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting. So we're actually going to be moving back to the very first recipe, to the cranberry port sauce now. And we're going to do a chicken stock-based one and a vegetable stock-based one, just so that everyone will have a chance to experience the cranberry port, because like I said before, can't have Thanksgiving without some sort of cranberry something or other. And so this is a really basic sauce that would be, I just came up with for this class. Just because I was like, cranberries, port, yeah, let's do it. So basically when you make a sauce, it's all about creating the foundations. And typically some sort of onion would be the foundation. So in this case, we're using shallots. And then we're going to sweat the shallots in butter. Then we're going to deglaze with some port and the cranberries going on in there. And then add in the stock. And then these types of stocks, especially obviously the vegetable stock, but if there's a prepackaged stock, there is not going to be any of the actual stuff that makes a stock have a body or thick at all as it reduces. So what makes a stock have body is this ingredient called collagen. It's basically the tendons and the cartilage and everything that, as you make a stock, breaks down and just makes that stock just really, remember, if you have any stock and it's refrigerated, it turns into like a gelatinous sort of thing. Mm-hmm. That is the collagen that's kind of providing that jello. That's why gelatin is non-vegetarian, because it's made with animal products. And since we don't have homemade chicken stock, we're going to use a little substitute of just cornstarch to thicken. And we're going to use organic cornstarch because organic cornstarch is GMO free. It's made from corn that has not been genetically modified. And that is, in my book, kind of a way I try to eat, especially when you're doing the whole nutritious eating. Everything else is nutritious. So, so to start with the shallots, again with the knife, very easy. Take the tops and the bottoms off. And whenever I do any sort of prep in mass, as in like there's lots of little, like I'm chopping more than like 1 or 2 shallots, I kind of do one task all at once, and then kind of like an assembly line go into the next task. So once those ends are chopped, then I just make a tiny slit down the middle and peel. Do that here.
While you're cutting those, I want to let our listeners know that your recipes are going to be available, and if anyone would like a copy of them, they can email us at info@ycdholistichealing.com, and we'd be happy to get a copy of these recipes to you.
Excellent.
Yeah? And I'm hungry. Is anyone else starving, smelling all of this?
Oh, wait till this.
I know, it
port
smells
sauce
so
goes
good.
on.
I had a quick question about gluten-free diets
Mm-hmm.
and rice and arsenic. Do you have to watch the amount? I heard someone say you could substitute the almond with rice milk. Is there a point where you need to start watching your rice
Yes,
intake?
that's a good question. So non-organic rice does have arsenic in it. It's the type of arsenic that's not as bad for you. There are 2 types of arsenic. There's inorganic and organic arsenic. And the type that's in rice is the one that's not nearly as toxic for you. However, it's all about total load. So if you're eating non-organic rice all day, every day, you actually can increase your arsenic intake, which can be problematic over the long term. So it does wash out if you wash it with filtered water. So arsenic is in our water. It can be, depending on where you live in the country. But arsenic does rinse out with filtered water. So if you happen to have a non-organic rice, just rinse it really well, ideally with some filtered water in your sink. Otherwise, if you buy organic rice, typically there's not nearly as much arsenic when it's grown, so you can keep your the amount that you're exposed to down.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
And all I'm doing right now is making little half spheres of the shallots. Because whenever you cut anything, you kind of want to always maintain a flat surface, just so that the product that you're cutting is stable. Because like this guy is pretty rolly. See, like if I'm trying to like cut it, who knows where my knife will go. So now that they're flat, then again with the claw and just go nice little cuts. And then I like to use my knuckles as a guide as I'm going, because it kind of helps me do the quick. And there's no way that I'm going to cut my knuckles unless I raise my knife really high. But I've been doing this long enough and have a relatively decent idea. Like, shallots are easy because they are pretty small little things, so you can just kind of whip right along, kind of like the mushrooms. And then get these guys, get some butter going on in here. Where'd that butter go? Always better with butter. Get a nice little knob in there. That'll be the chicken one.
So long, people thought that if you use butter, it might not be healthy for you, yet you're integrating butter into it.
Right.
Why is butter healthy for you?
This is one of my favorite topics. I love recommending that people use butter as long as it's grass-fed butter. So some cows are fed corn, and then we take the milk from them and turn it into butter or use the milk. And some cows eat the grass. They're out being pastured. And what the animal eats ends up, well, for the cow specifically, what the cow eats ends up in its milk and in its meat. So it makes a huge difference what fatty acid profile ends up in the milk. So sorry, I'm trying to talk over your chopping.
I'm trying to cook some food.
Grass-fed beef, grass-fed dairy has an entirely different fatty acid profile than corn-fed beef, corn-fed milk, that kind. So, and actually, believe it or not, grass-fed butter is a much healthier fat. Now, it is a saturated fat. Saturated fats are solid at room temperature. So coconut oil is a saturated fat, butter is a saturated fat, lard is a saturated fat, whereas an unsaturated fat is something like olive oil, which is liquid at room temperature. And saturated fats were really vilified in the whole low-fat movement throughout the 80s and 90s. And with saturated fats, it's all about moderation. They actually are not nearly as bad for us as we originally thought, as long as you're having them in moderation and balancing them with some good oils like olive oil as well. So believe it or not, the tune is changing on fats in general, and saturated fats also are included in that, but you do have to be careful. The devil's in the details when it comes to them. So it is necessary that you choose grass-fed for the healthful benefits instead of a corn-fed butter.
So I grew up in the marjoram era.
Yes.
What was marjoram? I mean,
Margarine is a
fat.
trans fat.
Okay.
So basically, it's not a real fat that existed. It has a totally different chemical structure that was used to increase shelf life. So it's hydrogenated, which is a chemical process that they came up with to increase stability. So they took an oil and they hydrogenated it, which changed the chemical structure to make it solid. And so it's not one that we digest very well. It's called a trans fat, trans just being the way that they changed the chemical structure of it.
So why would they say it was better for people with high blood pressure and cholesterol?
Yeah,
back in
because
the day?
we thought that the fats that you eat were directly the cause of high cholesterol. Because it makes sense, because cholesterol is a waxy fatty substance. And so the early research thought it directly linked that the fats that you ate were the fats that looked like they were clogging the arteries. But what's actually happening is cholesterol comes and it actually has a protective effect. We need cholesterol to survive. It's the precursor to all of our hormones, but it's when it's out of balance and it's clogging our arteries that it becomes a problem. But the reason it's clogging the arteries are when the insides of the arteries are inflamed. And so cholesterol comes and it can actually start to build up to try to heal that inflamed part inside the artery. And not to go on, I don't want to interfere here, but basically it's other foods that are causing that inflammatory response inside the artery. And so fats actually have that therapeutic anti-inflammatory effect if you eat the right ones, if you're eating omega-3s and you're choosing a good fatty acid profile in your food. And it's things like sugar that are actually more problematic, and processed foods that are causing that inflammation that cholesterol is responding to. So the research has changed on that. It's really interesting. So fats actually are really healthful for you, and it's more the carbohydrates and the sugars and the processed foods and some of the junk that ends up in our food that's ultimately more problematic. Yeah. And trans fats don't get digested well, so they're very inflammatory.
Thank you.
I get excited about that topic.
We can tell.
So what I have going on in these two pots is just sweating down some shallots in the butter. And now this one's just about set. I mean, kind of tell. So when I say they're translucent, you kind of see it becoming a bit more translucent. I guess no other way to use that word. And then, so once they're sweated down enough, then I'll go ahead and deglaze with some port. So this is a ruby port as opposed to a tawny. Don't ask me the difference. Ruby is red. Should I measure? No. Just do a little bit like that. And then we'll throw in some cranberries into there. And let that reduce, and then, oops. All right. That reduce there. And actually, let's go ahead and wrap this guy up too. And then as the ruby port reduces, it's going to become a nice syrupy consistency, and that's how you know that the alcohol is evaporated away, and now there's the shallots and the cranberries will just have absorbed all of that yummy sweet flavor. And as these guys are going, we'll just finish up the last bit of work for the mashed root veg, which is chives. Which I forgot to do. So, chives, a nice little herbaceous note, perfect with mashed potatoes. Nothing too groundbreaking here. Nice basic chops. Nice and rustic, and right in there. Now it's been probably about 45 minutes or so it's time to check on those little birdies. Ooh, how are those looking?
They look great.
Yeah. And birds are coming along. Okay. So the temperature that you need to, according to the FDA or whoever sets those standards, the temperature of poultry should be up to 165. But the thing to know about when you're cooking anything, it's all going to continue cooking after you take it out of the oven or the stove. So I usually pull around 150, 155, and kind of let time do the rest, just because otherwise if you pull at 165, it's going to be an overcooked, dry, less than pleasant morsel. But without any temperature controls, we'll just kind of do it by eye. And if you jiggle the drumsticks, or the legs, as they might otherwise be called, once the bird's done, then they are loose. If they're still really tight and holding on, then the muscles are not fully cooked. So, you can do that, and that stuffing is set. Okay. So the next step then, as we're waiting, actually I'm going to check on those legs and see how soon they are. Whoa.
While he's checking on the legs, do you want to give me some feedback, David, so I can let our audience know?
Yeah, I would say I'm probably going to pull them out.
They are looking ready.
They are loose legs in there.
Who's had Cornish game hens before for Thanksgiving?
Not for
No, for Thanksgiving, yeah.
Oh, my kids think they're so cute. It's almost sad. They're like, they're so cute and little.
We cooked them last year for family for Thanksgiving, and it was so much easier because we got surprised last year for Thanksgiving. We weren't planning on hosting, and then the day before, plans changed and people had to come. So we didn't have a turkey, but we were able to get these.
Golden hue to them.
Oh my God, they're gorgeous. Beautiful.
Little legs, jiggle, jiggle.
You can't serve 30 with that, though. But.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. You can't serve 30.
Set these here to cool. Let's crank this guy. So I'm going to turn the oven up to 450 now to get those Brussels sprouts cooking. Let me see if I could. Oh, it only goes.
So while he's doing that, there are other forms of butters or substitute butters out on the market. I can't remember what they're called, but they're out there saying like Smart Balance and all
Smart Balance. There's Earth Balance.
There's Earth Balance. How do they all differ? And is one better than the other, or do you go to the grass-fed
That's a good
butter?
question. So if someone has a really severe milk allergy, then they can't use butter because it does contain some of the proteins that people can react to. If someone's lactose intolerant, for instance, using butter is typically fine. But for instance, I have a really good friend who has a severe dairy allergy, and she can't do butter or even ghee, which is clarified butter. So she'll choose Earth Balance, which actually is non-GMO vegetable oil that's been turned into, emulsified into a solid form. And so that's preferable over margarine, which is a trans fat, whereas Earth Balance is fine. It's not a trans fat, and it's GMO-free vegetable oil. So it's a better alternative for someone who wants that buttery substance if they can't have grass-fed butter.
Great. You know so much about butter.
I like butter.
Butter is good.
You generally add the pepper at the end?
Yes. Generally speaking, you have fresh cracked pepper at the ends to kind of do the final tweak of the seasoning. And now you can see, yeah, this guy has started to become a bit more syrupy here. A little bit. You can see over here, it's gotten reduced quite a bit and gotten a little, oh, and right in there, syrupy. And I had way too much poured in that one. Should have measured. Whoops. Well, these are still reducing, so we're going to work on dessert now. So I brought 2 recipes for pumpkin pie. One requires baking, and the other does not. And so the trick with the non-bake one is our friend cornstarch, once again, doing its thing, binding things together. making this pumpkin pie mixture hold and stable.
And I'd like to point out that you found a organic cornstarch, which is non-GMO, because corn is very commonly a genetically modified ingredient, but it is possible to find a healthier option as non-GMO. Where did you find this? Do you remember?
It's pretty common,
Is
actually,
it?
yeah.
Okay.
I think Hannaford's even.
Yeah.
Yeah. Double emphasized, all right. So, what I like about the no-bake, gluten-free pumpkin pie is the crust. So, unfortunately, it is made with almonds and pecans and gluten-free oats. But obviously, with the dates unfortunately burn in the oven. I experimented. It was a sad loss of ingredients, but maybe the raccoons will enjoy it. So I'm going to, all you need to do is basically use this food processor, which is, I don't know, I could do, or can I have you do it? I'll show you. So we'll start by adding 2 cups of dates, if you want to get those in there first. And I want to show this process because it's really, the first time you do it, it might be a little tricky. But basically, we're going to process the dates so it forms a nice ball, and it actually comes together as a ball. Then we take that out and then add in the nuts. Being careful to not let it go too fast because otherwise it'll become like a butter or a paste. And we want it to maintain its mealy consistency. And then we're going to combine the dough, or the dates and the date ball and the almond meal into a dough. And then we'll press it into the pie pan. And then from there, I will show you the rest of the gluten-free.
We've got 2 cups of dates. What's next?
2 cups of dates. Go ahead and get those processed. And then when it turns into a ball, it's right there.
Oh, thanks.
If you could just give a shout and we'll take a look. All right. So,
It's processing slowly but
processing
surely.
slowly. So dates are very sticky, so this happens sometimes. Where once it gets going, it'll get going. Maybe.
I'm pulsing it.
Oh, you're pulsing. Okay. Well, while she's working on that, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to measure out this vegetable stock for the cranberry pork sauce for the vegetarians. And it's basically 1 cup of liquid for 1 teaspoon of cornstarch. It's kind of the consistency that I find works. So we'll measure up 1 cup. And so this color of this veg stock is because it has turmeric in here. So it kind of gives it that gold color. And let me show you actually. So right now the port is pretty much all reduced. That's kind of why I want to. So in French, would be called au sec, which would mean till almost dry. And at that point, we'll add that. And then the bay leaves, rosemary, and thyme in there to make it nice and herbaceous and kind of cut through the sweetness of the port and the cranberries. And just overall make it a nice stock, and then we'll want to bring that to a boil. Oh, so the portion is 1 teaspoon of cornstarch for 1 cup of liquid. Kind of adds that nice saucy consistency. And so actually I just made a little error here. What I should have done is put the teaspoon of cornstarch in with the liquid. as opposed to what I'm going to do right now.
It'll all work out.
But it's all going to work out because this is good. I'm glad. See, I knew it. But it sounds like I just hear those dates back there struggling. I'm feeling sorry.
Just practice safe processing.
That's a good question. The question is to whether we could soak the dates beforehand to make them more cooperative.
Laura, you're a doctor?
I think the food processor broke.
So, go entertain. So what's happened here is,
So one thing that I didn't mention in the beginning that I wanted to mention about gluten-free cooking, or just about being gluten-free in general, is only about 1 out of 100 people have celiac disease. That number is actually growing significantly, and no one's exactly sure why. So celiac disease, if we're talking about a spectrum of gluten intolerance, it's the most severe, and it's the type where someone has to be very strictly off of gluten for the rest of their life. It's an autoimmune condition, which means that when someone eats the gluten, it triggers an immune response that causes destruction of the lining of the small intestine. And so it can cause significant problems in terms of absorption and downstream problems from that, things like osteoporosis, malabsorption. So that's the most severe form of a gluten intolerance. But what I was talking about in the beginning about how people are developing this increased sensitivity to gluten, perhaps because of the way it's grown, wheat products are grown, or because of our digestive ability is a little bit compromised, or also sometimes because of what's sprayed on the wheat plant, that many people are developing what's called a gluten sensitivity, or it's known as a non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So it's not here in terms of the severe end of the spectrum, and it's a little harder to diagnose. It's sort of on the spectrum of reactivity to gluten. It's in the middle here, and symptoms of that can be things like headaches, digestive distress, gassiness or bloating after eating. Sometimes people will develop skin rashes or other problems like that. Whew. Successful dates. I'll keep talking when he's done.
So Laura, what percentage of people you said like 5 or 10 have like the major? What have the minor?
The gluten sensitivity. So from my personal experience of testing people in my practice, I see that it's almost 60%.
Wow.
It's really high. Who come to me for help, and it's not always digestive related problems. So people can have things just like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, autoimmune conditions.
So what do you think the overall like public has?
I think probably about 50 or 60%. And I think it really is that high in terms of a non-celiac sensitivity for the reasons that I mentioned. The fact that the wheat is different than what our parents and grandparents ate. The fact that it's so heavily sprayed and we're reacting to what's on it. And then a lot of times it's our own immune system and our own digestive compromise.
That's affecting their like
I absolutely do. When I'm working with kids who come in, a lot of the kids who are brought to me for an appointment, sometimes the parents are concerned about attention deficit disorder, ADHD success.
yes.
See, that's why you do the cooking and I do the talking about other stuff.
So, an addendum to the recipe, here's what the date ball will end up looking like. Would be, instead of throwing all the dates in at once, gradually introduce them to the
Is that where I went
blade.
wrong? I was just following orders, chef.
And that's why she's the doctor
Yeah.
and you're the chef.
Yes. Solving food
So
problems.
I have seen several case studies, and these are just case studies. I would like to see more research come out about this. I think that would be really helpful for everyone. So I've seen case studies of kids who come in with pretty severe ADHD and behavioral problems. We tested them for food sensitivities. Gluten came up positive. We took them off it, and dramatic changes in behavior. Dramatic changes. It was incredible. But they didn't have celiac disease. They fell into this sort of gray zone medically of this non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And a lot of people are finding that they fall into this category. And it's not an allergy. It's different than an allergy. An allergy is when you're exposed to a food and you have a pretty immediate reaction to it. It's the part of your immune system that reacts very quickly. A sensitivity, it's thought to be a different part of the immune system. That's a slower response or a more delayed response. And you can do a blood test for it. It's not done typically. It's usually a non-conventional lab that you'd have to do that through, but you can be tested for that. Or you can just try a 2-week gluten elimination. Usually 2 weeks is enough to just see if it changes symptoms, unless it's a skin issue, in which case you'd have to do an elimination for several months. For some reason, that just takes longer for people. Yeah.
Does it also affect things like depression?
It can affect mood and anxiety, depression, things like that, because many of our neurotransmitters are made throughout the digestive tract. So what we eat has an impact on that. Absolutely, yeah.
So if you wanted to reintroduce wheat, if you bought the ancient grain wheat,
Yes, that's such a good question. So the question is, can you do the ancient grain wheat? A lot of times that comes as like the Ezekiel bread is one of the more common strands out there. So the Ezekiel bread, I'm going to sort of circle back to your question about that. The Ezekiel bread is sprouted wheat, which means that they took the whole germ and they actually sprouted it, so it started to grow a little bit, and then they milled that and turned it into a bread. And that actually makes it more digestible. So that brand and other brands like it, they use the organic wheat, so it's not going to be sprayed with some things, so it reduces that component of reactivity. And then the sprouting of it makes it a little bit more digestible. And it's often the pre-hybridized strain of wheat. So people who have had a wheat sensitivity, oftentimes if they come off of it for a little while, if they've had digestive distress, it allows for some healing of the digestive tract. And then you can often add that wheat back in the ancient grain wheat or the sprouted bread. People tend to digest that much better and tolerate it fine. Whereas eating, a baguette from, a poorly or cheaply made one might cause problems for someone else. Yeah. How we doing, Chef?
Well, so as you can see, the vegetable one has gotten a nice consistency. Looks nice and saucy. Yeah. Saucy.
Rich.
Luxurious.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, even despite my little mistake of not, you might have noticed how this time I whisked in there just to make it a nice, smooth consistency. So we're actually trying to heat off of there. And back to the, what is the word?
Brussels sprouts?
Gluten-free. Brussels sprouts are self-cooking.
Okay.
I think the max of this oven is 400. I can't get it higher. But it'll be all right. Now we're just gonna you've got the date ball going.
I'm going to make a comment about the gluten-free oats while you're cooking that, if I may.
Yes.
So oats aren't typically a grain that's thought to have gluten in them. They don't naturally have gluten in them. However, they're often cross-contaminated in one of two ways. Either they are grown in a field next to wheat or in a field that originally was growing wheat, and so some of the germ from that can get cross-contaminated into oats. Or many oats are processed in a plant that also processes wheat products. So they're a commonly cross-contaminated food. So if someone is very sensitive, perhaps in the celiac end of the spectrum, oats can be a problem, but you can buy certified gluten-free oats, which is what we're using in this batter. Right? Yeah.
Yes. Noise bomb.
Danielle's been baking gluten-free for how many years?
10.
10 years. So, yeah.
So we're talking about gluten-free baking. What kind of flours do you like to use?
After a lot of time. I like to use sweet sorghum, millet, and a little bit of sweet rice flour. I don't like to use it. I'm down my best salad because it's in everything and it has such a silky flavor.
Yep.
So I generally add an extra egg.
So sorghum, millet, and rice flour, sweet rice flour.
Sweet rice flour because it's a little bit more sticky. It has a little bit more of that gluten thing, and I add an extra egg. Generally, I could transfer just about any recipe now over to gluten.
Transferring it
Bread is
over.
so
10 years.
good. Oh my God.
Yeah, after
Better
10
than
years.
regular
That's
bread.
really good information. So, yep.
Cheers.
Yes, thank you, thank you. So I'm just going to do a quick rundown of gluten-free grains while David's cooking. So millet is a gluten-free grain. Quinoa is an excellent gluten-free grain that's really easy to cook. It cooks in about 12 or 13 minutes. It's also really high in protein. All rices are gluten-free, so those can be good options. And again, you want to rinse them well before cooking with them. Sorghum is less commonly known or used, but can be a great one. That's what's used in a lot of gluten-free beers.
I was just going to say.
Yep, sorghum flour. And then teff is another grain that is known in more African cooking. If anyone's had Ethiopian food, the injera bread, that's kind of the spongy bread that's used in Ethiopian food, often has teff flour. Traditionally, I think it's cooked with just teff flour, but sometimes in the United States, wheat flour is added. So if you are strictly gluten-free, it's always good to check when you go to a restaurant if they use just teff or teff plus wheat flour. Those are the most common gluten-free grains that we'd cook with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the tricky part with using the date ball, so how sticky it is, it does not always cooperate. And of course, now that we're live, it is showing how it does not cooperate. So we're gonna need to incorporate it the old-fashioned way. Just kind of manually knead it, just like you would a regular dough. Making those little pea-sized guys. And then, Brussels sprouts still going good?
They look great.
Fantastic. Now let's see if that actually, want to take the floor, I'm going to finish this up now.
Me too. Any other questions about gluten at this point? I'm gonna ask. No. It has surprised me in my practice how often I see people react to it and how significant the changes can be when someone actually comes off of it. It's really amazed me time and time again. It can have profound changes, which is why we wanted to create this Thanksgiving meal gluten-free, because not everyone needs to be, certainly, but it just seems to be a food that so many people react to that I want to educate people about it more and show how easy it is to make a delicious gluten-free meal, especially when you learned from Chef David how to add so much flavor in. But it's so common in things that you wouldn't think. So it's in a typical Thanksgiving. It'd be in the stuffing. It'd be the flour that you use in the gravy, in the bread rolls, and the crust of the pies. It's everywhere in the beer that people are drinking, if they're drinking beer instead of wine. So it's so common and can be hard to avoid. And if someone's so used to cooking a certain way, then you don't know how to make some of these changes. And it really can be easy once you get the hang of it, right?
Yeah, I don't really actually think about needing to avoid gluten so much. I just, because I don't know why. I mean, I definitely do drink some beer. That's the only issue. But everything else, as far as food goes, though, I just kind of doesn't even cross my mind to use sprouted grains or use rice-based items and stuff. But speaking of gluten-free alternatives, though, we have the dough. This is what the crust, the dough eventually looks like once it's all pureed up the way it should, nice and dispersed. Kind of, it looks a little crumbly, but see it kind of sticks together. The dates kind of hold it. And all we're going to do is a little spray, just lightly grease the pan.
And what are you using for your spray?
I'm using a coconut oil spray from Trader Joe's.
What else? What else is in the, I'm sorry.
So dates, gluten-free oats, pecans, almonds, and some pumpkin pie spice. And then we just kind of,
Wow, I could eat that, yeah.
Just that. You don't need anything else.
yeah, it's kind of tasty, actually. So should be able to scoop that in something.
Do you want me to clean it? Or?
Is there a way we could get some samples of that out?
Oh, yes. I can make that happen.
And then all I'm going to do now is kind of press that dough into the pie pan. And it just kind of comes together pretty easy. So you can see, zoop. Just press and then kind of go up against the sides.
Feel free to take a little bit and pass it around.
And then yeah, we got a little sample of this crust going along, just because it is pretty tasty just on its own.
I have a question about, I'm not cooking your oats. Like, is it a, I don't know, I always hear like cooking my oats. Is it easy to digest oats that aren't cooked? You know, I never,
That's a good question.
and it's for the Brussels sprout checker. Dr. Laura?
Yes?
Question is, are oats that are not cooked easier to digest than oats that are cooked?
Like, is it bad for your digestion not to have cooked oats?
It can be harder to digest raw oats than cooked oats. The cooking breaks down some of the proteins and what's in the oats. Or soaking the oats can be a great way to break that down to make them easier to digest, but then you don't have to cook them as long as they're soaked for a little while. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
Yep.
that is the one that requires baking.
You're filling. It's pretty.
Would you like me to pull the Brussels sprouts out?
Are they nice and charred?
They're almost there.
Uh-oh, watch your tone.
Let's give them 5 more minutes, please.
Got it.
So my favorite part of the Brussels sprouts being charred is the charred leaves on the outside are, I think, delicious. Like my favorite part. So once you press the gluten-free crust in, this is what it looks like. Looks pretty easy to do once you get everything incorporated.
That's delicious. Right there. I don't know, just the crust. Don't you know? There's no cinnamon in it? I taste.
And then, yeah, dates, and there's some pumpkin pie spice in there, a little bit, just like 1 teaspoon. And so now we have, can you find me a spatula, please?
I can.
Or a spoon. I'll take that spoon, that's in the cups. Thank you. And so this is the pre-made pumpkin pie filling that has set earlier today with the cornstarch. So you just kind of dump it into the pie crust. And
Wait, so David, is it more than just pumpkin pie and cornstarch? It looks a bit thicker.
well, there's pumpkin pie or pumpkin.
Coconut milk? Oh, I'm sorry, I have the wrong
There's
page.
2 recipes of.
Okay.
It says
Oh, there we
no
go.
bake, gluten-free
Okay,
pumpkin.
got it. Sorry. Thank you.
So a little story behind the 2 pumpkin pies is that I, just from my history of growing up eating pumpkin pie and having it be my favorite dessert, I was like, no, bake pumpkin pie, what do you mean? And so David made it, and I thought it was delicious, but I wanted the traditional pumpkin pie, so he placated me by making both.
Yes, because I am a
Nice husband.
nice husband indeed. Yeah.
Wise husband.
Smart, very smart.
It is delicious. I longed for the traditional, so he
So
decided to do both.
For me, I love pumpkin pie, but it's all about like the spice and the pumpkin pie spice more than like the actual baked part. So I relented and made it. So all you got to do is spread this guy out pretty simply, more or less. Be easier with the spat, but, and then voila, pumpkin pie, no bake. Zip.
Then would you need to refrigerate that to keep it or not?
Once it's set, it's pretty set. I think I haven't tested how hot it can get before it starts going, but I think once it is set, it should be. Looks like
put it in
starch
the fridge.
bonds it.
Probably because you had it 4 to 5 hours already.
Yes, it has been chilling for quite a while. But now I believe those Brussels sprouts are all set. Oh yeah. Yes, I can smell the char on them. And let's see. Yeah, nice brown char. It's getting kind of hot there. It's really hot. It is burning. Brussels sprouts set. Sauce.
We're getting near ready to eat this.
We are. It is time to. I think it's time to serve up. Actually.
All right.
What do you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
So good.
I know. Do we need some refills on any beverages?
Just water.
Fantastic.
So is there a special way of serving up a delicious meal that you present and how you put it on the plate in order to make it even more appetizing?
When it comes to Thanksgiving, I just pretty much just try to get a little bit of everything to somehow fit onto a plate. I'm definitely the kid who always overflowed the plate and everything gets all mished and mashed and overflowed my burritos so they never stayed as burritos. But there is a certain, in my general form of eating, I do like to present things tidily. And so like, it looks kind of aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And when I came up with these recipes, I tried to do things that had a bit more color than just like brown on brown and white and brown. So this is Brussels sprouts, chives here, nice little kind of ruby colored sauce. And in these Brussels sprouts, we toss them with some sunflower seeds to get a nice little crunch. I'll just put them right on in there.
Here's a rub.
Thank you. I just kind of mix up. I did not bring enough forks.
I have some.
Great. And then this way, so Brussels sprouts, once they're really nicely cooked, they don't have much of a texture. They kind of turn to mush. So these sunflower seeds will kind of have a nice little pop crunch to your overall mouthfeel. All right. So now make some space.
I'll move this. And that.
Thank you. And my original plan is to simply cut the birds right down the middle, and everyone gets a half serving.
We already ate some.
So, go ahead and all right. Should we collect the plates and
If you want to pass your plates in, we'll start to get your meals ready. But everyone's hungry by now. No sauce. No almonds.
So how do you cut a quiche? Are you gonna show us how to cut one in half nicely?
Yeah, actually,
I've never cut one in half.
I was surprised at how easy it was, in fact. So, let's see here. Scoop this. Pardon me, Robin.
May I start serving this on the
Yeah.
plates?
So, we'll do the first test one. Hopefully it works. So right down the middle. So since they're so small, as long as you have a sharp knife, it goes right through. And plop. And
Okay.
okay.
So is half a serving size?
I generally find like half, because they're small birds, and
You're gonna get some right.
with the bones, a whole one is a little bit too much, but a half is it's a nice sweet spot, especially with like all the sides and everything going on.
Okay.
So we automatically get those.
So again, these recipes, they
Just
smell
by watching,
amazing, they look
exactly.
amazing. If you would like a copy of these recipes, please email us at info@ycdholistichealing.com because these look really good. And I can't wait to dig in. I know everyone else is starting to drool a little bit too. So if you have any questions about gluten or any other food sensitivities or nutrition questions, please also email us. We'd be happy to address those questions on future shows. And come join us sometime. You can also find out about how to participate in our live audience and actually taste the food. So we'd be happy to share that with you. But thank you so much for teaching us all of this, David.
My pleasure. Hope to see you all again, and bon appetit, I guess.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay.
everything's like this. Oh yeah, wanted to carve you a little piece?
No, we didn't eat, so we knew it was good. Yeah, very late lunch. We can bring it home. Oh, I'm not.